the heart of your system.
I'm Leo Order for Kit Guru. I didn't do a Leo Says last week, and the reason for that was I was busy doing a review of the Intel Core i9 9980XE, which turned into about a 20-minute discussion about processors, both AMD and Intel, and I referred to some AMD rumors that are doing the rounds about Zen 2 Ryzen 3000. So in my mind's eye, I did a Leo Says, but I didn't actually get to it. So this is kind of last week's Leo Says, number 33. So go to the video for 9980XE. There's no point in me repeating all those points about power, heat, soldered heat spreaders and all the rest of it. We've done that to death. The comments below that video, naturally we had, I don't want to be pejorative, AMD fanboys were clearly pitching in because I was unimpressed by this hugely expensive Intel processor, but thankfully it wasn't a kind of complete tribal thing going on where people are just literally yay for AMD. It was a bit more thoughtful than that, and that was really welcome. One of the points that came up was to do with, I think this may have been, if we're going to use the term an Intel fanboy, to do with Intel is indeed progressing with 10 nanometer, and we've also read recently that 7 nanometer EUV is also happening. Intel has multiple development teams working on the current process, the next process, the process after that, as it's a many-year process. And a point that was made, and I did allude to this in that video, is that just because a process is called 14 nanometer, 12 nanometer, 10 nanometer, 7 nanometer, they ain't all the same. It depends what you're defining within the process. Different features are measured in different ways. They have different sizes. So Intel's 14 nanometer, for example, is streets ahead of AMD's 14 nanometer, which is reckoned to be 20 or 20 something nanometer, and which is, we often refer to Intel having a better IPC than AMD. So Kaby Lake, Skylake, Coffee Lake against Ryzen, clock for clock, and you get into that whole thing. Having said all that, of course, Intel also has higher clock speeds, which also demonstrates that they effectively have a better process and probably a smaller process than AMD. If Intel can sort out 10 nanometer or indeed park 10 nanometer and move on to what they're calling 7 nanometer, which would appear to be more advanced, would be better, rather than saying better, more advanced than TSMC's 7 nanometer, then they will clearly move on to the next generation of manufacturing. However, the fundamental thing that came out of my Intel video, for me anyway, is that AMD's change in how it develops and designs processors, this chiplet approach that we're going to first see with Rome Epic, with one IOX in the center and 8 chiplets around with up to 64 cores. That's a fundamental reimagining of what processors are all about. So if Intel simply takes its current processors and shrinks them down further and gets more cores into the same monolithic die, then things will have changed, but they won't have changed fundamentally. For me, yes, I'm interested in what Intel does or does not do with its processes, and then the yields it gets and what it can manufacture and so on and so forth, and whether it moves to 12 cores on a desktop and 36 cores for high-end desktop and all those other numbers. But for me, the question is, when will Intel move to multiple chips? Let's call it chiplets, as that seems to be the term we're all settled on. And that is going to be the big difference. It's not going to be simply do they do exactly the same thing, to shrink, 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 and down we go. It's going to be, when does Intel change how it does things? That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. The fact it will probably coincide with a die shrink, a process change, that's also good, albeit it adds to the complication. But what I'm really waiting for here is not just 10 nanometer or 7 nanometer, is when Intel changes how it goes about processor design. And I also had to think when I was doing that Core i9 9980XE, it really brought up the question of what on earth is a high-end desktop processor. I mean, HEDT, it didn't really exist until a few years ago, and then Intel developed this thing which was, well, you can have 6 cores on the desktop or 8 cores. This was when obviously desktop processors were quad-core, so moving to 6 mighty cores and quad-channel memory was like a thing, albeit a slightly expensive thing, but it was a thing. And then they moved on to 8, and then when they got to 10 cores, suddenly the price went whoosh up from expensive to really expensive. And then we suddenly had this thing going on, and this is a repeat of the history lesson. AMD brought in Ryzen with 8 cores on the desktop, Threadripper was in the offing, Intel leapt to 18 cores to leapfrog the 16 cores of Thread, and so on. And the software writers haven't really kept up. Not surprisingly, because this has happened in a really short period of time. We're talking less than 2 years. It's taken us from quad core on the desktop to 8 core on the desktop, both Intel and AMD. And at the high-end desktop, we've got 16 and 18, and then AMD's also got 32 core Threadripper, which is a different animal. That is not a high-end desktop gaming processor. That is a workstation processor, without, in my opinion, a shadow of a doubt. But nonetheless, it shows that things have changed, and in a really short period of time. I don't doubt Intel could have made some of these changes themselves had they chosen to, but they didn't feel the need to. So without a doubt, AMD, its competition, has pushed Intel along. Okie dokie, that benefits us all. But the world has changed, and I'm really now wondering whether high-end desktop is just a misnomer. If you can get 8-core 16-thread on the desktop in albeit the prices are rather high, so we're talking £600, but it should be £450 to £500 by rights, which is still quite a lot. But nonetheless, £450 to £500 for that many cores, or you can step up to 16 for what we're thinking of as low-end workstation really, or 32 cores now for a proper workstation processor. Where does high-end desktop exist anymore? I know we're looking forward to seeing this new Intel repurposed Xeon, the 28 core with presumably X599 platform. That should be fascinating to see, but it's looking like a white elephant, isn't it? The idea it's going to do anything beyond run Cinebench, but just some mind-boggling speed. Beyond that, in terms of what you can actually do with it, games, surely not. 3D Mark, really? Benchmarkers, I'm sure are going to love it. Overclockers, well, maybe not overclockers, because I imagine it's going to arrive on its limits. Nonetheless, that strikes me as being the absolute end of the line. The thought that came to mind was Howard Hughes made that colossal, was it 6-engined seaplane called the Spruce Goose, the largest propeller-powered aircraft. Absolutely monstrous great thing, and that was way past the end of that particular line. Also, I was quite interested to see in the various comments, it appears that some of you didn't know what Jumping the Shark and the Fonz and Happy Days and so on. So I keep forgetting, you, dear viewer, are probably younger than me. It was quite amusing to see the response. So at least we managed to educate some of the younger generation about TV and just how dreadful it used to be. In that Intel video, I referred to AMD's rumoured plans, and they are rumours, quite clearly, and they come out of Reddit, so, there's a thing. Nonetheless, there are so many points of data that either someone simply manufactured a load of stuff, or it's a wish list, and it really does feel like a wish list to me, but nonetheless, apparently at CES, AMD is going to announce Ryzen 2, which means that the model codes will be Ryzen 3000, because we're already out of step, because the revision to Ryzen, which was, Rev 2, was then called Ryzen 2000. So the model codes are already bad. And these are products that then are supposed to launch in Q1, which strikes me as very early. So that's the first query I have with these rumours. Nonetheless, here's the thinking. Ryzen 3 is going to be 6-core 12 thread, so we're talking one chiplet, one IOX and one chiplet, and then there'll be a second chiplet which will be either a dummy or in an APU will be Navi graphics. So we're talking 6-core 12 thread, apparently boosting to 4 gigahertz, and then you're talking about a price around the $100 mark, which looks highly tempting. The idea that anybody's talking about pricing at this stage in the game, I really don't understand that. We don't hear about prices typically until the product is, absolutely upon us. And the idea that there's apparently written down prices at this stage, I struggle with that. Then we have Ryzen 5 8-core 16 threads, so clearly the better silicon. That's meant to boost to 4.8 gigahertz. That strikes me as highly optimistic, but you never know. And pricing there $200, or alternatively Ryzen 5 might be an 8-core 16 thread APU, which would then obviously have Navi graphics on the second chiplet. That would boost to 4 gigahertz. That strikes me as if such a thing can exist. That strikes me as a very interesting processor. Then we have Ryzen 7, so we're now into 2 chiplets, no graphics obviously, 12 core, 24 thread, so that's obviously 2 6-core chiplets. Apparently boosting to 5 gigahertz. This strikes me, I have to say, as fanciful. I mean, I'd love it, and pricing there apparently $300. And then we have a new Ryzen 9, 16 core, 32 thread, so obviously 2B8. Again, 5 gigahertz boost, price now $500. Now, quite clearly, were AMD able to produce such a processor with those sorts of cores and speeds, quite clearly that would be wow, absolutely. But I have to say, this strikes me as very hopeful thinking. I'm not sure wishful thinking is entirely fair, but optimistic almost to a fault. If AMD can come out with these products announced at CES, launch them in Q1 with those high-end parts coming along for May, which is AMD's 50th birthday, in time for Computex, well, that would be a thing. I mean, that would be truly remarkable to see. I would like to see this, I really would. I really struggle to believe that these facts and figures are so. It's that thing of not taking on trust something that you actually want to be true, because you can get suckered so easily that way. It also strikes me there has to be the potential here, because this has come out of Reddit, that this is to do with pumping up AMD's stock price, and that's been a bit of a roller coaster recently. That was going up, and then tech stocks recently have gone down quite significantly. So there's that. In terms of processors, I have here my new iPad Pro. Turn it the right way around, that'd be good. Pencil on the right. And this is also causing me some, concern would be the word, because the thing is that I can edit 4K video on iPad Pro. It is quite remarkable what you can do with less than 10 watts. That's the Apple A12X processor in that iPad. It's passively cooled, takes almost no power, does a remarkable job. And it makes me wonder how much of the products that we get excited about on the PC, in the PC arena, are held back by software. Because in the case of the Apple, they've clearly got a combination of processor, operating system, and then some clever person's written some clever software that just makes that video editing fly along at an ungodly speed. It seems in PC terms impossible, and yet it works. Nonetheless, I hope AMD has these products coming along, and I'm hoping the rest of the ecosystem, to use that terrible word, can keep up, because there is more to life than just a processor, or indeed a chipset, or indeed a motherboard, or indeed memory. There's more to it than that. Whether the bottleneck for us is Windows 10 or the software, I don't honestly know. Nonetheless, iOS on the iPad Pro with the applications that, when they work well, is a truly remarkable thing to behold. Other things that have come along, Samsung 860 QVO SSD, going to go on sale in 2 days, I believe. They've announced 1TB, 2TB, 4TB SSDs in 2.5-inch form factor. Speeds of the QVO SSDs not especially fast. Basically, they seem to be fighting against really decent hard drives. The significant thing of QVO is quad level cell, or QLC NAND. Now the thing here is that TLC is obviously triple level, so you're adding a 1/3 capacity, all other things being equal, so you can step up from a 2TB SSD to just about 3, or you can just about make it to 4 in a given form factor, but you can't push on, we could just about get 4, here's 8. Doesn't work like that. To do that, you need to either change fabrication process or stack the chips a lot higher. But the benefit you do get is that prices of those SSDs seem to be very reasonable. I'm waiting to see UK prices, but the list price is $150, $300, $600, so $150 per terabyte. Still expensive compared to hard drives, compared to where SSDs were. That's looking really promising, and we can forget now about 250 and 500 gigabyte drives in this territory. If you want a Pro or some such drive, yeah, okay. Now, the question mark over QLC, it was only 6 months or a year ago we were genuinely wondering if it could even work, because longevity appeared to be absolutely terrible. To do quad, you have to split each cell into so many parts that the difference between this level and this level is absolutely tiny. A short time ago, it seemed to be almost impossible, and now here we are with actual products. So what we don't know is about longevity is not only how long will the cells actually last, but how long will they last reliably. Error correction is going to be a significant part of how this SSD works. So initial reviews will be interesting, but it's going to be how it works over the longer term. Now, it's not just Samsung doing QLC. QLC is now a thing. Intel was the first actually to come to market with QLC, albeit only a few weeks ago. So this is all good stuff, and it means that SSDs are going to move further into the mainstream, but it also means that you very much get separation. So SSDs that are for really heavy-duty 4K video processing and such like, you may not want to go near these, whereas people who simply want to have a nice quiet PC or laptop that's got plenty of capacity, excellent. QVO is going to be the one with QLC NAND. Oh yes, indeedy. So very glad that Samsung's brought those out. I've included the next item because it's got the word JEDI in it, just because it's funny. This is a Pentagon military project called JEDI, so Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure. Basically, it means cloud computing. The idea is that wherever soldiers and vehicles are, they'll be connected to the cloud. They'll have information out where the enemy is and such like. They'll know where they are. Quite clearly, security and connectivity are the two major things, and probably speed. But security is crucial, because if you've got a map that shows where all your people are, you don't want the other lot knowing all that good data. And to take it to the most extreme example, if your nuclear codes are baked into it as well, that wouldn't be a good thing to get out. One of the companies bidding for this project, which apparently is worth about 10 billion US, is Amazon Web Services, that's AWS. And the BBC today over here has reported that there is a concern, apparently. I don't know if this is a concern for the BBC or a concern for other people, but nonetheless a concern, because AWS apparently is connected with a company called C5 Group, and C5 Group apparently is connected with a Russian named Viktor Vekselberg, which sounds like the sort of name you'd see in James Bond. Now, AWS has said that C5 is nothing to do with JEDI. Yes, AWS has had connections or has connections with C5, but C5 is not connected with this project. Therefore, whatever Russians are involved in C5 doesn't matter. That's what they are saying. I would have to say that I'm guessing the American military has considered the thought that the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and good knows who else might be interested in what's going on with JEDI, because, you would be, wouldn't you? In fact, who wouldn't be interested? So I'm guessing that the Americans have already considered this thought. And you'd hope this is the case. So I'm actually slightly baffled as to why the BBC's come out with this story, because it either suggests that the American military is just stupid and didn't really think this one through, or it suggests that it's just a connection of things. Russian connected with Amazon, Amazon bidding for thing, therefore quite clearly Russian going to be running around inside the American military. Struggle to see that. Nonetheless, anything is possible, but the fact it's broken as news today, it definitely intrigued me, and it's a way of getting JEDI into a story, so we can't let that one slip by. And then we come to the next big name in tech, which is Nvidia. A few days back, Nvidia launched Titan RTX, priced at £2,400, 4,608 CUDA cores, 576 tensor cores. Those are those clever ray tracing parts and artificial intelligence machine learning cores that we don't yet know what the heck they do or how they do it, and 24 gigabytes GDDR6 memory. Now, some time ago they launched Titan V, which is £2,800, so in the great scheme of things the same kind of money. 5,120 CUDA cores, therefore a chunk more. 640 tensor cores, a chunk more. 12 gigabytes HBM2, less memory, significantly faster. Therefore, the two cards sit in different places. I don't expect I shall ever see, or ever have here rather, a Titan RTX. I fully expect to see plenty of the things, particularly at CES and Computex, but that product looks like a curious one to me. Titan V, machine learning, I could kind of see what that was about. Titan RTX, I struggle to believe that's really truly intended for high-end gamers. Perhaps it is. Perhaps I've just got the wrong end of the stick. But I'm not absolutely clear that that is for workstations either. Looks like a slightly curious product. But if Nvidia's taken the time to develop it, I'm quite sure they've got a very good reason for having it around. And then finally, the final bit of Nvidia thing to wrap up here is that Nvidia has a press conference scheduled for the start, actually the day before, the start of CES. Clearly Nvidia could have any number of things planned, but you have to think that's going to be mobile 20 series graphics. You have to, whether they call it RTX or not, goodness alone knows. Whether ray tracing has any place in laptops, goodness alone knows. But that has to surely be mobile products for CES. In which case, the sooner we see what they've got planned and whether it's sort of happening instantly or in a while. But once Nvidia announced RTX 2080 and RTX 2070, it's crystal clear we were going to see RTX in mobile. The only question is how much RTX hardware is in there and how much has been carried over from 10 series. I'm hoping this is truly next generation graphics, but if it is actual ray tracing in laptops, that would be fascinating to behold, how well they perform and all the rest of it. Can't wait to see that, and it suggests we're going to have a whole bunch of interesting stuff to see at CES in January, which will be a very nice follow-on from Christmas. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, well, okay. Do leave a comment below. We always like to hear from you, and make sure you subscribe, then that way we can tell you about new videos as they become available. I'm Leo Wood for Kit Guru. This was Leo Says.